Hello and welcome to my channel. Friends, the 20th century is called the century of technology because in this century man has progressed so much that he has not proceeded during last thousands of years. In this century, not only new inventions were formulated but also old stuff was innovated and the standard of living rose. Where the invention of the airplane made the journey comfortable, the ships were also innovated. Friends, ships have served humans for exploration and commercial purposes for centuries. In the 19th and 20th century, as trade flourished, so did the importance of ship. By the end of 19th century, when the shipping trade was booming, the world's largest companies began launching elegant fleets and luxurious merchant ships. Among these was a British company called White Star Line, which manufactured the well-known Titanic. As you know, it was wrecked during the voyage, a gigantic ship that took 3 years to be built and plunged in 3 hours. How true are the events shown in the Cameron's film Titanic? Was the ship smashed by an avalanche? Or the real fact are something else? Is the wreck still in the ocean floor? Who was the cowardly man in the Titanic? And who was the bravest man on this ship? Friends, in today's video we will know these facts. The RMS Royal Mail ship Titanic, a luxury steamship, was composed in 1909 and sank in the early hours of April 15, 1912 off the coast of Newfoundland in the North Atlantic after sidewiping an iceberg during its maiden voyage. Of the 2,240 passengers and crew on board, more than 15,000 lost their lives in the disaster. Titanic was one of three ships built by Harland and Wolff and the British shipping company White Star Line. The Titanic was the largest of the three ships. Its size can be gauged from the fact that it took 2 years to build the structure. After the structure was ready, it took another year to trim and embellish it. And in 3 years, the elegant ship was prepared. About 3,000 laborers and artisans worked to bring it to completion. There is no doubt that several huge ships are operating in the seas today, but at that time it had the distinction of being the largest ship in the world. The ship displaced more than 52,000 tons. The Titanic was approximately 882.5 feet long and about 82.2 meters wide. Her total height measured from the base of the keel to the top of the bridge was 32 meters. Titanic could carry up 2,435 passengers and a crew of approximately 900 brought her capacity to more than 3,300 people. The Titanic cost 7.5 million US dollar. Included veranda cafe, smoking room, restaurant, dining salon, and a reading and writing room. The facilities on Titanic far surpassed those of rival ships of that time. Moreover, the Atlantic Daily Bulletin was printed every day aboard the Titanic. The Titanic had four smokestackers or funnels, but only three carried smoke from the furnaces. The fourth was said to be the ventilation and aesthetic purpose only. The plane had 50 phones through which passenger could communicate with the land population. The first voyage of the Titanic began on April 10, 1911 under the sustenance of Captain Edward Smith. The ship was so outstanding that when it was leaving the port of Southampton, England, more than 1 lakh people were on shore to see it. The duration of the voyage from Britain to New York was 7 days. The ship was scheduled to reach its destination on April 17. On April 10, 1920, the Titanic set sail on its maiden voyage, traveling from Southampton, England to New York City. The traveling ship was fittingly captained by Edward J. Smith, who was known as a millionaire's captain because of his popularity with wealthy passengers. Indeed, on board were several prominent people. Several American businessmen, British journalist Joseph Bruce Seme was an English businessman who served as chairman and managing director of the White Star Line, were also traveling on the Titanic. He was the one who claimed that the Titanic could never plunge. Throughout much of the voyage, the wireless radio operators on the Titanic, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride, had been receiving iceberg warning, most of which were passed along to the bridge. But the administration did not heed the warning. It is also said that J. Brooks did not let the ship stop so that a new record can be set by arriving at New York one day before the scheduled time. Several ships sailing on the same sea route sent warning to the Titanic, but the Titanic continued to move at the same speed. On the evening of April 14, the Titanic began to approach an area known to have icebergs. Smith slightly altered the ship's course to head farther south. However, they maintained the ship's speed of some 22 knots. But it was too late and the ship had arrived very close to an iceberg. At 11:40 p.m. on April 14, the giant ship collided with an avalanche at the distance of 740 kilometers from the beach. According to some survivors of the devastation, when the iceberg was spotted, it was only 500 meters away. It was not possible for a huge ship with such a high speed to turn so rapidly. Captain Smith ordered to turn the vessel left, but it was too late. After the collision, a large crack had been formed on the right side of the ship, causing water to enter the bottom of the ship. The Titanic is said to have been built with the technology that even if the water enters the fourth compartment below it, the ship will not sink. But instead of four, the water entered the sixth compartment, due to which the ship started tilting to the side. At first, the passenger did not know the catastrophe had taken place, but an hour after the accident, the whole ship panicked. Meanwhile, Captain Smith, for help, ordered fireballs to fire into the air and began placing women and children on the lifeboats. Some people, realizing the danger at the beginning, started leaping from the ship. Interestingly, the ship should have 60 lifeboats, but because the ship owner thought the ship could not sink, only 30 lifeboats were placed. With the effort of Captain Smith, all the lifeboats were launched into the sea. Friend, the ship took 3 years to build, wrecked in just 3 hours. According to the eyewitness, the vessel broke into two segments and the last moment, and people were still leaping. About 1,500 out of the 2,200 people lost their lives in this disaster. Only about 700 lives were saved thanks because of 20 lifeboats. Some lifeboats were overcrowded and some were with a low quantity of passenger even than capacity. Interestingly, when the Titanic was sinking, there was a ship called California, which was only 37 kilometers away, a steamship of the British Leland Line. However, despite her proximity and the distress signal Titanic raised, the Californian took no action. Another ship named Carpathia was there at the time and was 107 kilometers away. The Carpathia arrived at the distress call's position at 3:30 a.m. Approximately an hour after the Titanic had plunged. For the next 4.5 hours, the ship took on the 705 survivors of the disaster from Titanic's 20 lifeboats. Captain Arthur Henry Rostron ordered the Carpathia to the Titanic position, which was about 58 miles away, and began preparing the ship for any survivor. Despite the presence of iceberg, the ship traveled at top speed some 70 knots, arriving at approximately April 2012. Captain Arthur Henry Rostron of the Carpathia received a silver cup awarded from Molly Brown for his role in the rescue of Titanic survivors. French scientists are still working to find out the fact and reason behind the sinking of the Titanic century ago. Some people accuse Captain Smith of sinking the ship because he did not suggest turning the ship despite receiving numerous signals. In addition, the presence of less than the required number of lifeboats in the ship was also considered as tremendous negligence. More lives could have been saved if there had been more lifeboats. But despite these shortcomings, Captain Smith kept putting women and children on the lifeboats till the end. He was the last person to jump off a ship. He leapt out when it was completely submerged. That is why he is considered the bravest man on the ship. Saving the lives of others at the risk of one's own life is not an insignificant entity. A tribute was paid to the captain for his bravery. His statue was erected in Beacon Park in England in 1940. The captain of the ship showed great heroism, but when the owner of ship, J. Bruce, chairman of the White Star Line Company, saw that the ship had been stricken, he immediately jumped into the lifeboat and fled for his life. For this reason, he is considered the cowardly man on the barrage. It is said that it was J. Bruce who forbade Captain Smith from slowing down the speed of the vessel. Due to his selfishness, he was criticized in the world and called the most coward man in the world. Finally, the wreckage of the Titanic was found by a retired naval officer, Robert Barrell, in 1985, 70 years after it submerged. The wreckage of the Titanic is still present at the depth of 3,800 meters below sea level. After finding the wreck, where many questions were answered, some new questions arose. When eyewitnesses to the crash reported that the vessel had broken into, no one believed them, but when the wreckage was examined in 1985, they were found to be true. In addition, an investigation team estimated from the wreckage of the Titanic that the lower portion had caught the fire before the avalanche hit, weakening its lower part. This is why the lower part of the Titanic was more affected after it collided with the iceberg. The fire was so intense that its temperature reached more than 100 centimeters. The staff tried hard to put out the fire, but when failed, they left it burning. They probably did not tell the passenger about it. This evidence was given by an Irish journalist who was been analyzing the wreckage of 30 years. Friends, we also tell you some interesting facts about the Titanic crash. 300 bodies of those killed in the crash were found and were buried in the cemetery. Fairview's Lawn Cemetery, located in Canada. The bodies of the others were never found, and Captain Smith's body was among those. In the last moment of the sinking, the musician they started playing music so that people would not panic. Malvina Dean was the youngest of the 705 survivors of the sinking of RMS Titanic and lived to the last survivor. She was only 2 months old. Date of birth February 2, 1912. Malvina Dean passed a life of 98 years and died in 2009. She is also called the last survivor of the Titanic. John Jacob Astor was the richest passenger aboard the RMS Titanic and was thought to be among the richest people in the world. At that time, with the net worth of roughly 87 million when he died, it is estimated that by 2030 the wreckage will be gone, being dissolved. There was also a nurse on the board who managed to escape from the Titanic accident, and after this 4 years later in another civilian accident too. Numerous books have been written and films have been made on the disaster, but James Cameron's film, which was released in 1997, gained a lot of popularity and grossed over $2 billion. The film won 11 Oscar awards. It is said that there were some telescopes for the crew and passenger in one of the rooms of the ship, but the room was locked and no had the key. If they had these telescopes, they would probably have seen this iceberg from a large distance. England, as well as the United Kingdom, conducted extensive investigation on the wreck and developed a plan of action to prevent future accidents. To prevent these accidents, a team has been formed to guide the ships in the sea to avoid these avalanches and give signals about them so that we never have to face this tremendous catastrophe again.